Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the known world, and welcome to the Crown Between Two Roses. Tonight, we have some special guests. Myself and the lovely Countess Beatrice will be interviewing Duke Sean and Sir Joel. And what's special about these two amazing nights is that they are other content creators who have been working tirelessly throughout the pandemic to make sure that we all stay engaged with the society. Duke Sean has been on, I think, every interview show so far, except for our own, and also hosts and is part of the team that coordinates Coach's Corner. And Sir Joel is one of the interviewees or interviewers for Grace Under Pressure. Sorry, it took me a moment. So B, if you would like to get us kicked off.
Thank you. So we do an acknowledgement of country at the beginning of every interview. So thank you for allowing us to do this. Good nobles, we come here together in the spirit of fellowship, deepening of our skills, sharing of our knowledge, and a shared interest in the search to find truth through experimental archaeology and historical inquiry. It is in this context that I, Countess Beatrice Maria Malatesta, on behalf of my kingdom, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we gather. We recognise their continuing connection to land and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Grace and Your Excellency. I'm very excited to be in this interview.
Be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. I'm not an excellency. I'm a low
You're
but thank you so much.
He's just a superstar.
One of those strange, like, colloquial things, because as I came up, I was always told that any peer you could address as excellency, and that would be okay. I'll allow it if I have any say.
I mean, I'm cool with it. I'm not one to get wrapped over titles. I'm just, but yeah, I'm. The way I always heard it was that was for nobility, and a peerage was not the same.
Yeah, it was pretty much anybody with a brass hat, like a court baronet or higher, was Your Excellency. And having an even nose is like when, as a duchess or even as crown, when somebody says refers to you as Your Excellency, you say thank you. There's no need to correct them and say that Your Grace or Your Majesty. You just say thank you, and because the general rule has always been is somebody got a hat on, you can call them Your Excellency, and you're right. They're at least that.
I acknowledge your humility, Joel. Thank you. But I will say that it's probably an extra special edition because B, this is the nighttime edition. You have 3 nights in your presence on this program. So I suppose the first thing that we should do to kick off is if you'd each like to tell us a little bit about how you started in the SCA and what drew you to the society.
Sean, go ahead, Joel. Go ahead. Fine, okay, I'll go first.
Put you on the spot.
I was working as a tour guide actually at a tourist trap in South Dakota. And I had this kid that worked for me that just would not shut up about the SCA. Like just nonstop every day talked about going out and getting into armor and beating up their friends, and he would not stop talking about the SCA. And he kept trying to get me into it, and I was in kind of a weird punk rock phase where I didn't want to do anything that could be viewed as nerdy. But I finally agreed to go to a fighter practice on the condition that I would go. If it wasn't my thing, he would leave it alone, stop talking about it every day. And if I liked it, I would keep going. And, that was in 2004. So here I am. I went to my first fighter practice. I was just absolutely hooked after that. Put on the super clunky, ugly loner armor that I think every shire in the known world has. And it was amazing, and I loved it, and been going ever since. Went to my first event shortly thereafter, and then the second event I ever went to was Pennsic 33. So going right into the deep end on that one, going from a small shire level event to principality, and then going to Pennsic. But it's kind of hard to stand on the battlefield at Pennsic and not be just completely hooked after that. So yeah, and then playing ever since, bounced around a few kingdoms, and I love it. It's about as good as it gets for me.
I should ask, where are you residing currently?
So I live in Callantyre, which is Iowa. Just moved out here. Haven't even actually been able to go to a formal fighter practice or an event yet because we moved out here while the plague is running its course. But yeah, it was just, before here, I was in Artemisia with Duke Sean, lived about an hour south of him.
We're big fans of Joel out here, and his wife Aniela, big fan of hers too.
And your Grace?
So let's see, my parents took me to fighter practice when I was like right before I turned 12 years old. It was this thing that they had been doing for a while that we didn't know anything about. We just knew it was this thing that they just disappeared every Tuesday night and went to do this thing. And then when the summertime hit, they finally took us to fighter practice. Didn't know what was going on. Didn't know where we were going. Had like no clue. And as we're driving by the park where fighter practice was, I happened to be in the car where I could look down on the field, and I see all these guys fighting, right? And I told my parents, I'm like, okay, I don't know what you guys are planning on doing, but I'm doing that. And my dad was like, well, I don't know if we got time and all this other stuff, and he was kind of playing it up, and sure enough, that's where we were going. But I got out of the car and I saw the guys fighting, and I knew instantly that that's what I wanted to do pretty much for the rest of my life. I've never had anything grab me as passionately as SCA combat did from the very first time I saw it. I was very lucky that my parents were both they both played for a number of years. My mom still plays quite a bit. Not as much as she might like, but she still plays. I was very, very fortunate that they were supportive of my want to do this, and that they gave me the leeway to go and travel with the person who ended up becoming my knight. And I became a squire, and then I fought the first time at Estrella 1, and then Brian won crown right after that, and I'm going everywhere and fighting the best fighters in the history of our sport, and that's no exaggeration. Everywhere I go, people want to fight Brian, and Brian's like, yeah, sure, no problem, and then has him fight me, and I'm like, woohoo, I get a fight. So I never, from the very beginning, I never had that thing where I said, well, I don't want to fight him because is that guy knight, or how many times has been king, or any of that. Is like, Brian said, go fight somebody, I go fight them. And so I never had that that thing where I didn't feel like I was good enough. I mean, I was, there's a lot of my success that I attribute to a certain amount of ignorance and innocence. I was too stupid to know that I should have been afraid of some of these people. Brian just throws me at him. I'm like, sure, let's go fight. So that's pretty much that's the beginning of it. And then it's been a great ride ever since. And being able to help people now attain the kind of success that I've had is absolutely intoxicating, and that's pretty much one of the things that keeps me around.
So I know that both married. Did you meet your partners in the SCA?
I did.
Can you tell us the story?
Let's see. So yeah, actually, okay, maybe I can't tell the story. Suffice to say, I met my wife through a mutual friend, is Grace Timmer, who was one of my squires. We typically had gone for a time. We were like opening night of pretty much whatever movie was opening on a Friday night. We'd be down at the theater, and I had not been able to go for a while, and Timmer and my wife, not my now wife, Christina, they were at the theater early when I got there, and that was the first time I met her. She was very new to the SCA. She had actually, she's super shy. And so she had actually been at an event, like actually she was there in 2002 when Timber got knighted. She was camping with us, and I never saw her because she like paid for kitchen stuff and just Timber brings people into camp, and I never saw her then, but she was actually camping with us, and like 3 years later she pretty much owns the place. So yeah, we started dating shortly thereafter. I think we met in I want to say the summer of 2003, and then we moved in together by 2004, and been together ever since. Her first reign was 2009. Yeah, that was the first reign with me, and that was after we had been together for one of my previous reigns with Duchess Karin. Nisa was not quite ready to do the queen thing yet, and so we were living together for that reign, so she got to see a lot of the inner workings of how things go behind the scenes. And then we were Baron and Baroness of our local group for 2 years before winning crown. So we just stepped down like December, and then I won crown in April, and then she and I have had three crown reigns together.
Wow.
So my answer is kind of. We're both Scadians before, but so I was actually deployed at the time. So I was in the Middle East, and my knight was trying to convince me to move to where he was currently living, and he was doing that by going, "Hey, look at this cute girl," and sending me like her profile, and "Hey, look at this one," and so he was trying to convince me to move by just showing me how cute they were, some of the women in the area were, and my wife ended up being one of those people that he introduced me to. And so the first like 5 months we talked, I was in Afghanistan, but I got back, and I was actually not planning on really being too heavy back into the SCA when I got back because of burnout and my own and dealing with my own personal struggles at that time as far as what my viewpoints of the SCA had tilted towards. But I got back, and the plan backfired magnificently on my knight because she ended up moving out to where I was stationed at in Colorado, and we started dating in June of 2014. We were I think I proposed by like October or something like that. We got married in 2016, and she hasn't kicked me to the curb yet, so it's been good. So yeah, it's kind of a weird roundabout, mostly SCA. Yeah.
I mean, you're very lucky, not only because I'm sure you have a lovely, beautiful wife, but also you could have gotten catfished with that. Well, that could have been a 50-year-old man looking for fun.
Thankfully, my knight knew her, so they were local to each other at that time, so I wasn't too worried.
As far as
that.
you know,
that's fair. Also, she's admitted she almost didn't message me back because my Facebook profile, she could only see like the things that I had left a like on, and one of them was Beavis and Butthead, and so she almost didn't message me back because of that. So there you go. There's a fun fact.
I mean, I suppose people do use social media differently, but I know most of my likes are probably things that I liked when I first got Facebook, and then after that I realized that trying to keep up with pages wasn't worth it. So some of those things can be quite dated, but you know what? I like animation, so Beavis and Butthead. Don't judge a book by its profile, I guess, is the So I wanted to ask, because of course you're both knights, what aspect of tournament culture is your favorite within the SCA?
Sean, you want to go first? You want me on this one?
What aspect of tournament culture? Honestly, it's the competition. I've learned through our sport, especially to be, I'm fairly competitive, at least in this sport for sure. And for me, it's not the winning of the list. really all that exciting. It's the trying, it's the struggle, it's the competition, the not knowing. Some of my favorite fights that I've ever had are fights of, significant tournaments, like Outlands Prize Tourney, or perhaps like Ursulmus, or Sport of Kings, or some of the others tournaments that I entered that were high profile tournaments, and fights that I lost. So the winning is definitely, I mean, winning is awesome, right? We just kind of had that discussion on the coach's corner earlier tonight, that winning is always better than losing. But losing is a fact, and it's just the competition, it's the struggle, it's the trying, rather than the overcoming. And so I think that's it for me. Besides that, especially when you look at Crown, there's no greater feeling in the world than being able to put a crown on my wife's head. When the SCA started day one, we didn't have a king. The tournament was done, and the victor of the list named his lady to be his queen of love and beauty. So we didn't have a king day one, we had a queen day one, and that's where it all started. So that's a pretty huge part of tournament culture, especially Crown, because that's kind of takes those roots all the way back.
Absolutely. And it's so unique. Joel, go ahead.
I'm not actually a very competitive person, as far as I like feeling this, like I have to win, or I have to have a game face or anything. And Sean or any of my friends can attest to this. I do my best in tournaments when I'm just being a total goofball and not actually thinking about the tournament. Like in between rounds in Crown, there are people who they have to keep their their game face on. They have to, stay in that zone. And you will frequently see me screwing around with, like, chasing kids around the field or something like that in between my fights. Like that's just like my personal philosophy, I think. But I ended up getting to the point where I am with fighting because I just like, I have so much fun with the fight itself that I wanted to get better at it so that I could have better fights with more people. And that fed into the tournament culture and being able to do moderately well in some. I haven't won a crown yet. Fingers still crossed that I'll be able to someday. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I think that as long as you're having fun and you're doing this for whatever your personal motivating reason is, you're not wrong. I always tell people, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. It doesn't matter. There was some dude at a Great Western War a couple of years ago who went out there dual wielding giant Scudum shields because he was having fun with it. Like, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. And the evolution of my fighting came from just having fun at getting better, and thankfully being in a good training culture with a lot of really good fighters and people that understood my philosophy and how to adjust their training to match how I learn, because I'm, pain's a great motivator for me. So some of them just learn to straight up just punk me. And my favorite fights, the ones that I always remember, are always the ones that I lost, actually. Like, I can think of 3 fights off the top of my head that are my favorite of all time, and they're all fights that I lost. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I have fights that I've won that, I can remember clearly and that are high on my priority list of love. But yeah, my favorite fights of all time are ones that I lost. And one of them was actually a fight against Sean at a fighter practice, because of how clearly of a training moment it was for me. And then another one was with your Grand Squire Ursa, who flat snapped me to high hell because I got lazy. So, but
she's a good kid.
Yeah.
It's one of those things it's hard to actually express to people, because there is like almost a sort of bond that you form on the field with other fighters. And that's, for me, I'm going to answer my own question, but like, I actually I don't enjoy the competition of tournaments very much. I love the tournament because I love the pageantry and being able to come out and put your training to the test and have that opportunity to leave the field better than you came, whether you're victorious or whether you learned something. But for me, it's actually that I actually really love the bond between fighters, that you could meet somebody on the field that you've never met before, and you like, if you're a bit socially awkward like I can be, you can't probably have a conversation beforehand. But after you've had a few fights, you can go off and you instantly have that bond of, you know, companions at arms, being able to go off the field, and you've shared that experience. And I think that is something that permeates our fighting culture, especially in the SCA. And I think there's nothing else quite like it. So
Yeah,
And,
Steve,
you know,
I
that-
want to hear your answer, but you were laughing at something.
I was laughing because Waldo, who was here camping with me, was doing a dance and lifting his shirt.
do we leave a tip, or I get confused on that.
I'll just give him a beer later. That will be payment. He'll be fine.
Oh, that's great. Well, tonight's episode is sponsored by White Claw, so you know, I think Evie, you really hit it on the head, because you know, one of the things, and everybody that knows me knows this, and I bring it up every now and then, but you know, Palantir is my like sixth kingdom, and the SCA is a huge, like, has made moving and the kind of fact of the life of my career so much easier, because no matter where I go, I have friends. I find them the next fighter practice, or you know, arts and science night, whatever it may be, and hey, we're all mutual nerds about something, but yeah, that shared camaraderie it's hard to replace. And yeah, I think that was a big driving factor of improving my fight anyways, was because, you know, you show up to a new area and you give a really good fight to anybody, no matter what their skill level is, you know, you can talk for hours afterwards, just totally dorking out.
Yeah, you know, Eva, you're talking about how you meet a total stranger and you get to fight them, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have a friend for life. And I've been very fortunate to have that happen over the years. You know, run into somebody completely on the random at Pennsic or Estrella or whatever. And one of my favorite fights in the entire world is Duke Sven from up in Ontario. And he was one that I met at Estrella when Skepti was king, and said, "Hey, I want you to fight my King's champion." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." I mean, you know, I had a good relationship with Skepti, and so yeah, he says, "You fight the guy, I fight the guy," and that was the first time that I met Sven, and it was like I knew nothing about him except that, you know, he was champion, which I know in Ontario is a big deal. But other than that, I knew nothing about his fight at all. And being able to fight at that level against unknown skill versus unknown skill, just raw, right out of the box. You don't know anything about somebody, and you get to fight them. And he's a very good friend of mine, and probably my favorite fight in the whole world right now. And it all comes from, as you mentioned, the kind of that random encounter, and you know, the bonds that we get from being able to have those experiences are lasting.
So you've mentioned that you are you've lived in different kingdoms. What would be the biggest differences that you've noticed?
So every kingdom kind of has its own, you know, its own flavor almost. You know, Palantir is very much a melee kingdom, and they're very much a Kingdom Pride, where you're purple kind of kingdom. Artemisia has a very strong tournament culture, and it's but I love Artemisia, and it's pretty much I consider it home.
It's home.
Yeah, it's home. But it has a very strong you know, tournament culture there, where it's very much about the pickups and the tournament fighting and the individual. Outlands, on the fighting level anyways, they're all about a skirmishing style, running gun. You know, the Outland shield walls, just 20 spearmen running around. But every culture, every kingdom has different, really different strengths that they all bring to the table. And it's always fun learning those different anthropology and the different approaches, and seeing how, you know, seeing how they almost rebel against the kingdom that they spawned from or came from. You know, you'll see, you know, you see in North Shield where they kind of struck out a little bit from the mid-realm Outlands away from Aidenveld, Artemisia from Aiden. Basically, everyone that way is from Aidenveld. But you know, every kingdom has just different traditions that I think is awesome. And you know, it's always interesting to learn that, though. I usually learn that by screwing something up, and then the people I live locally going, "Hey, not cool, man. And I'm like, oh, okay, my bad.
Well, and I was in the military for a while too, and so I went to school in Pensacola, which was is part of Meridies. Um, and then I was out in Guam and Korea, which is part of the West. So I've traveled extensively as well, and probably the thing that really excites me about it all is the interkingdom anthropology. You know, the idea that we're all basically playing the same game, but you go kingdom to kingdom, and there's so many different flavors of SCA that are they're all within the same kind of structure, but every kingdom has its own unique culture. You know, you go up to Antir, and you know, it's a very strong you know, Norse culture. You know, you go to Callantir, and you know, welcome to Callantir, here's your great sword, and welcome to the Outlands, here's your Madu. And you know, just like so much history. I mean, I've known a lot of the Huskarls out of Callantir for so many years, and I love going to Penzek or Estrella and ending up in the Callantir camp and singing with those guys, and just seeing how very different each kingdom can be while still adhering to essentially the same game. It's really fascinating to me. I love it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I have such a passion for learning about other kingdoms and how they work, all of that. I have quite a few friends that live in Applemark and East Kingdom, and doing a lot of the interviews, but building those relationships and getting to know what other kingdoms are like is just fascinating for me.
Yeah, and Althamark and Glenavon are both kind of unique in that they started as the center for their big events, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Althamark was part of the East Kingdom, you know, and then all of a sudden when they break off and become a kingdom, now they are the host for Penzek instead of being, you know, I mean, the debatable, you know, the Barony March of the debatable lands in Pittsburgh. You know, it's like now they are the host for this, and Glenavon kind of did the same thing where, you know, you have Trimaris and Anstiora having this war in the Gulf, and Meridies was the host, and now Glenavon is the host, and it's just really interesting watching how those kingdoms have become their own entities and how that kind of changes. It changes the flavor of the war a little bit because, you know, now they're host.
Yeah, so for me, I've come into the Penzek, like the international travel component, only in the last 8 years. So, and we have got quite a few people, members of our populace, who have travelled over to Penzek and seen that, but it's definitely not a history that a lot of the lockup travellers are aware of in that space.
Yeah, well, and it's, you know, I was talking to your Crown Prince recently and mentioned asking if he was going to come over here, and just I realized that it is a tremendous burden for you guys to come to the States for an event, and so, you know, and I know Lockhawk typically has a large presence at Penzek, and the logistical nightmare that has to be for you all to come to Penzek in such numbers that you do is just our Herculean task.
Yeah, apart from the fact that our international border is closed and we're not allowed to leave at the moment. Yeah, so maybe next year, fingers crossed.
That's probably a good, I promise this will be my last fighting based question, but I did have my partner Duke Felix really wanted me to ask Duke Sean this question, because we understand that Artemisia does pulled round robin crowns. Is that what you do? So he wanted to know what your thoughts on the importance of that is to your kingdom's fighting development, specifically the round robin for crown tournament system.
Yeah, so I was the first crown to introduce the pooled list in our kingdom. I heard the concept at Australia one year, and I was like, that's brilliant. And we ran it. So at our coronation, we have a King's Champion and a Queen's Champion. Queen's Champion is unbelted only. King's Champion is chivalry only. And for the Queen's Champion list, we decided to do this pooled list as a trial run to see how it would go. we told our chivalry that we were going to be doing this and had them watch it to see, kind of get a flavor for it. And it was kind of one of those, we'll try it out and see how it goes sort of things. So for us, the real benefit to doing a pooled list for us is, imagine you live in a really big kingdom, sparsely populated, like huge distances between, from one group to another. So I know you guys down in Lockhawk are going to have to like really dig deep in your imagination skills here. So our landmass is all of Utah, Idaho, most of Idaho, and all of Montana and parts of Wyoming. It's a huge geographical area, and we have limited population centers in that. So we don't have large groups of populations. Like in the Outlands, you have Colorado, or you have the Denver area, and then you have Santa Fe, and you have Albuquerque, and you have El Paso. Those are all large metropolitan areas. We don't have that. So we are small in numbers and we are large in geography. So it can be a 15-hour drive, top to bottom to get to Crown Tourney. So when we were doing regular double elimination lists, our numbers are typically somewhere, we average near 20. But you go to a double elimination list, you're going to travel 14, 15 hours to get to somewhere. You go 2 and out and you're done. And I know in the West Kingdom, they do the roses, which kind of addresses that, because there's a lot of people that go out in the first couple of rounds, but they also have 50, 70, 80 people in a list. So you have more and more rounds going on that you have time to.
I'm just going to reference for people from Lockhawk. The way the West Crown does their Rose tournament is they run a challenge field simultaneously to the early rounds of the Crown tournament. So people who have been eliminated can keep fighting, and they can give roses to their consorts or people that they think are deserving. With our Rose tournament, we generally do that the day after Crown tournament. So that's just what that means, is that people can continue to fight during the tournament rather than waiting till the next day.
Yeah, exactly. You go 2 and out, and you're done, and your whole day is just done, right? So we started doing the pooled list partially with that in mind. Also keep in mind too that I understand that the purpose of Crown Tournament is to establish heirs, right? I mean, that's and there are people that have said that, we don't need to think about how well somebody is doing in a list, or whether they're in or whether they're out. But honestly, the list doesn't take that much longer to run. So basically what we do is if we have 32 people in a field, we'll split that up into 4 pools. That's 8 people in each pool. That means every fighter in the list gets to fight 7 other fighters throughout the list. Then you take the top 2 fighters out of each pool, and that sets the quarterfinals. We do the single elimination, best 2 out of 3 for the quarter, semis, and finals after that. And so if you're going to end up winning the list, or you're going to go to the finals, you're only fighting a couple of more fights than you would in a double elimination. But everybody gets an opportunity to fight at the highest possible level. And we always seed the pools by precedence, because that is the only way that you can really seed the pools without any kind of impressions of impropriety, any shenanigans going on. So basically, if we have 4 dukes in a pool, they go 1, 2, 3, 4. They're in their different pools, and we just go through the list and just go by precedence. So what you get is Joe Newbie fighter gets to fight everybody from the 2-year fighter to mid-level line belt to newer knight to royal peer to super duke. Right? You get this whole spread of people in your pool that you get to fight. One of the other things that we do with it too is we allow people to fight as by-fighters in the pools. So you get extra fights in the pools, but those fighters don't come out of the pool. And typically those fights don't count for you or against you. But that gives people that don't feel like maybe they can do the job, gives them an opportunity to compete against people who are absolutely fighting at their best to be able to do that. So being able to give people more fights and for the fighting community, I think it's been a real benefit in that people feel like they're not just wasting their time to go to Crown and go 2 and out. So that's some of the benefits, I think.
And it really does encourage people to participate, especially in a kingdom like Artemisia, where population base is pretty small compared to some other areas. It's a way to get more people involved and to be willing to come out, because as someone who has not even made it to the finals in a Crown, I can say it sucks driving 15 hours to go 2 and out. Like, that sucks. So Artemisia, with the pooled list at the beginning there, that's a great way to get those fights in and do it. And but yeah, it was only kingdom I know of that approaches it that way, and I love that it's a it's always kind of a bring your best. It's not like starting off where, okay, first fight's going to be polearm, next fight's going to be great. Like, because I've always been a fan of Crown Tournament just being you bring your best fight for that day. Whatever your preferred weapon system is, that's what you bring to the field. And if it's sword and shield for me and polearm for you, let's see who's better that day and go from there instead of doing the match thing. So yeah, I really like how Artemisia runs their Crown list. And there's pros and cons to every different way of doing it, but yeah, the pooled list has definitely been my favorite approach that I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And the way we do it, it keeps you from having 3 people in the finals as well, which is always kind of a mess.
Yeah.
I am very curious. So one of the things with our Crown tournaments is that nothing else is run against the Crown tournament. There are no other activities. Is that the same in the kingdoms that you've been in? Apart from the West Kingdom, because we know that.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the Roses tourney that is happening, and even with that, and when they do the Roses tourney in the West, they usually start that after the 4th round, and there's usually 7 or 8 rounds, or 8, 9 rounds, in a Crown, and typically by the time you get to the semifinals, they stop doing the Roses at that point, but there are so many people in the list that after 4 rounds, I mean, you've lost a third of the list. So if you have 60 people that enter a list after 4 rounds, 20 of them are sitting around doing nothing. So they have an opportunity to go challenge other fighters, and and sometimes they have people that are still in the list that will go fight Roses during the list, depending on how they're feeling. So it makes sense. It makes sense for them. But most kingdoms that I've been to, while Crown is happening, that's pretty much all that's happening.
Yeah, I think we were looking from a ideas point of view of, do they run arts and sciences? Is there archery happening somewhere? I know usually like finals is sacred and nothing happens during finals, but for the rest of the day, is anything else happening for non-combatants?
Typically in our kingdom, typically not. But again, with 16 to 20 people in the list and a pooled list, like if we have a smaller list, I'll do 2 pools instead of doing 4 pools. So if we have like 20 people, I might do 2 pools of 10 instead of 4 pools of 5, right? And those run pretty quick, because we typically you manage your own list in the pools, right? So you can pick the fights that you want. You just kind of match up with whoever's ready to go next. But you get to manage that to some extent. You look at the list, and I mean, even the newer fighters get to look at the list and say, do I want to start with Sean, or do we want to start, or do I not want to just go to my death right from the beginning? And maybe kind of build up to that, so they can manage that. It's logistically, it is a lot easier to just have people manage those lists, and we just report back. We have the winner report their victories to the list table. And there is definitely something to be said that there's a part of that, the part of the pageantry that does get lost in that. We will do the salutes for every round, but there's some of the announcing all the pairings for the entire list before each round is something that we don't have to do. You just line it up, and like I said, we always make the salutes. We do. It's just not the so-and-so fight so-and-so and single and honorable combat, and there's a lot of stuff that we do kind of skip there, but When you're in one pool, you always know where you're fighting as well. So your consort can be in one place, sitting there watching you fighting, and you go through all your fights, and you still get that pageantry. You still get that moment between you and your consort, which I think is the really important part.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for indulging me. I think I always like to hear about the philanthropy of how other people run Crown Tournament in other kingdoms. And I know that our kingdoms do have that geographical challenge. So I'm on the end of things where I go, I want more people to want to come to Crown Tournament, because, you know, we drove 10 hours to get to Crown, and, you know, our squires maybe only went 2 or 3 rounds.
But you went super deep.
But that's not important. What is important is that whatever's going to encourage more people
watching.
lends more dignity to the list, and it builds the culture, because we've had everything from, you know, I think maybe our biggest crowns in the recent years have been around the low 20s, and then we've had as little as 8. So the more we can encourage people to come, the better it's going to be for everyone, I think. But B, you can ask a totally non-martial question if you want.
Well, I'm actually going to ask the question that was asked by Chris. Because you have both been sharing your stories on other platforms and interviews, tell us a story that you haven't shared.
Oh,
I'm gonna let Joe go first, because I've got a good one.
okay. Oh man, hey, you're probably gonna be way better than mine. So as I mentioned earlier, Penzic 33 was my second event I had ever been to, so I didn't actually quite know what all the various hats meant, as beautiful and shiny as they are. So we were in between battles, and I had my helmet off. I'm standing up on top of the castle wall at Penzic, you know, at the battlefield there. It was the castle battle when we could still you know, we could still fight into and off the castle wall. Anyways, I'm standing up there, and this beautiful woman walks up and just leans up right next to me. And you know, being the, you know, young individual that I was at that time, because you know, I'll admit it, I was 21 for the first 3 years I was in the SCA, as far as anyone knew. But so, you know, I see this beautiful, and well, hello, and start talking to her, and I'm playing up my game and trying to be as smooth as I can. And my buddy is sitting, leaning up against the wall next to me, and he's kind of doing this number. And so they let me go on for about a solid like 5 minutes or so, thinking I'm being incredibly smooth, before a water bearer comes up and goes, "Oh, Your Majesty, would you like any water?" And I, not knowing what all the titles meant, wait, what does that one mean? And they're like still doing this number over here. And I never realized it, but her husband, who was the king, was on the other side of my buddy, because you know, that's how that goes. And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the queen of whatever." I can't remember what kingdom it was. But yeah, my friends just totally let me try and be a smooth operator there for about a solid 5 minutes against a reigning queen during Penzic. So there's a story you guys haven't heard yet.
All right, so my story that I haven't told on any of the shows that we've been on is actually for Chris. So time is weird, right? We all have like, especially when you're young, time passes a lot faster than you think it does, and you have this idea of you know, these events happened like decades apart, and like everything takes so much longer when you're a kid. You know, like imagine how long it takes waiting for Christmas. You know, from December 1st to December 21st to 25th, right? So time is weird. There was a series of events that happened early in my SCA career that, to me, for the longest time, just like were like these many years apart, and I just recently realized not so much. So I went to my first fighter practice in 1982, and in the spring of 1983, I went to what I remember as my first event. It was the first event that I remember being at, where I knew like what was going on. And that event was Crown Tourney, Maiden Belt Crown Tourney, held here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And at the end of the day, the victor of that list was Duke Christopher of Houghton. And so that was a pivotal moment in my SCA career, because it was like the first time that like, oh, okay, this is what's happening, and oh, that guy's going to be king. Okay, that's cool. And so it was a pivotal moment, right? So I guess it was just so shortly after that, I come into the service of Duke Brian Tarragon when he was Lord Brian Tarragon, squire to Robert Spencer. So summer of 1984, I got my AOA the same day that Brian became the premier of the Hawks Lure for the Kingdom of Aidenville. That was the first time they'd had an AOA level fighting award. So that was the summer. Brian got knighted in October. I became his squire at Solstice Court in December without ever having fought at all. Like, I hadn't set foot on the fighting field. It was all pell work at that point. Went to Estrella 1 in February of 85. That was the first time I set foot on the fighting field. Brian won crown a month later in March of 85. So in all of these, long time, all of these years that it must have taken for all of those events to happen, that was 2 years from the time I watched Chris win his crown to when my knight won his crown while I was his only squire. And then, then the travel ensues, and we went to SCA 20 year after that in 86, and I was knighted a year later. So from the time I saw Chris win crown in 1983 to when I got knighted was 4 years. And it was just recently that I realized how ridiculously short a time frame that is. And it was a different SCA in the 80s in a number of ways, some good, some bad. But that time frame to me has always been like, oh yeah, I was squired for all these years and these things happened. And man, it was like, I just recently realized how short a time frame that was. But Chris has kind of that footnote in my history, in that the first event I remember going to is when he won crown.
Wow, that's crazy. So definitely a short time.
Yeah, and now I've been a knight for 33 years, and that's, I've been a knight for more than half the society. And there was an interview recently with I think it was Rifkin's interview with Timothy of Arundel, where when Tim was saying that when he got knighted, there was nobody who had been doing this that long. Like, even in my kingdom at the time I got knighted, everybody that had been knighted like forever, as far as I was concerned, it was like less than 10 years. My grand knight, Sir Robert, was the first knight of, he's our premier chivalry. He's been knighted longer than anybody else in our kingdom. And that ended up being like 8 or 9 years before I got knighted. So there was nobody that had been doing it like this long.
Yeah.
What year did you get knighted, Sean?
87, AS 22.
Oh, just for reference to everybody watching, I was 2.
I wasn't going to be mean, but you've been a knight longer than I've been alive. So I have to say, because Joel made that happen. I'm sorry.
Well, no. Sean and I have a very friendly rivalry on a lot of stuff. So I did.
Well, and actually this summer, because it was June, it was June. This summer, I will have been a knight for 2/3 of my life.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I did. Sorry, Eva. I have a question about your the shows that you host. So, Joel, how did Grace Under Pressure come to be?
It was a good idea fairy that kind of took wings on me. So at the time when the first idea popped into my head, there wasn't a lot of content for non-fighters. There was a lot of great interviews going on, and a lot of content being put out there for Pell work and for tournament fighting and for melee and et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I'm a stick jock, so I was eating that up. Oh, well, I'm a reformed stick jock. Let me say that. But I was realizing that at that time, I hadn't seen a lot of content for the other side of the coin, where, you know, behind every good fighter is a good consort there, that is keeping them in check and really, you know, doing the real work there. I admit that. But so the idea kind of came from that observation, where I wanted to get involved in a series that, you know, where someone who may be interested in becoming a consort or, you know, becoming a queen, where we could get people together and they could hopefully learn what they may be getting themselves into, and you know, learning from the experience of the roses that are out there, because there's so much good experience that when it started was, you know, I didn't see a source for that knowledge. And you know, now that the pandemic's been going on for a little while, and you know, more and more people are becoming more comfortable with creating content in a virtual way. You know, there's a lot of great resources and interview series now that are not 100% fighting focused. You know, I'm definitely going to throw out a shout out to Achoxy, who's doing her, you know, Laurel's interviews, and they're interviewing Lions, and, you know, sister interviews, and I'm totally plugging them right now because they host our interview series. But you know, but that was kind of where it just came from, was that I wanted to make sure that anyone that wanted that information had a place to be able to go and get it, and to realize the amount of work that consorts have to go through, because I know I'm a total doofus, and my consort keeps me in check and brings me back, because I'll have the good idea fairy pop into my head, and she'll be like, no, how about you just come back over here now? And so, you know, that was kind of where it all came from, I guess. So, and then, you know, thankfully Choxy and Rifkin were totally on board with it. And then Duchess Dagmare, my co-host, she actually had a kind of a similar idea at the same time, and we had a mutual friend through Rifkin, and Rifkin and Choxy were like, hey, and, you know, and that's kind of where it took off from. And then, you know, Duchess Mary Grace was kind enough to be our first one, but, you know, the timing didn't work out too well, because I had the idea, but it was right when we were getting ready for our move to Iowa. And so it kind of stayed as a good idea fairy for a while, until eventually, finally, Her Grace Dagmare kind of kicked me in the ass and was like, no, we're doing this now, come on. And, you know, and she's been this phenomenal as far as working with, and because she does so much work as far as like getting the slides together, because I'm really technologically illiterate. So I always admit that, you know, she does the very bulk of the work with the interview series. She's phenomenal to work with, and, you know, she's a great heckler, so if she's watching, hopefully she knows how much I appreciate everything she does.
So for me, I'm involved in a couple of different shows, most notably the Coach's Corner. So the Coach's Corner is something that we'd actually started talking about that in the before times. That was like late or like early fall of 2019. Viscount Tristan, who's one of our coaches, had contacted me and Duke Branos. And, you know, it's kind of, he was doing a podcast for his Aikido dojo, and so he started talking to us about putting together something where we could get more access to some of the training that Branos and I have been doing. And me and Branos, we've known each other for a number of years, but he and I have been kind of training in parallel. Not in contrast necessarily, but like we hadn't really collaborated on much of anything. But, you know, we were kind of training in parallel, and Tristan had the idea to bring us together to kind of do that and kind of bring things to the masses. And we talked about it for a while, and things kind of, I think to some extent we may have kind of suffered a little bit from the you know, perfect is the enemy of good, because we were trying to figure out like how to launch it and what was going to be our first episode, and all these things, and trying to find out, you know, we were spending so much time, I think, trying to make it right, whatever right means. And then the holidays happened, and blah blah blah, and it just we kept talking about it, but it hadn't quite happened. And then the pandemic hit, and we're like, okay, now's the time. So our first episode was end of April. So we're coming up on a year. Actually, we got a 1-year anniversary episode that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So after it started with the three of us, and once we kind of launched this after the pandemic started, we brought in Duke Eliyahu, who is a college professor, so he comes to us from an academic perspective. And we brought in Duke Ronwalder, who's trained with Branos and is also a trainer throughout the world. Shortly thereafter, we brought in Sagan, and then Duke Thorfinn and Sir Optimus Adis, so that we can kind of spread the load a little bit, because it was like we knew it was going to be a lot fast. But it's been, the whole thing started as a kind of fireside chat sort of thing. Like, how great would it be to be a fly on the wall listening to Sean and Branos and Tristan talk about fighting, right? And we wanted to take that and give that to the world and let people know that they can be that fly on the wall, or you can participate. Like, you can have that conversation with us. And so like the episode we did tonight, we get the live stream going, and we get the comments that come in there, and we get the questions that come through there, and it's really become more community than I think any of us really could have imagined. And it's a community that we've been able to create that I wouldn't say necessarily it's taken on a life of its own, but it's definitely more than just the coaches that we have in our staff. So it's been the honor of my life to be part of that. I've said for a long time that having had the success that I've had in our sport, being able to give that similar success to other people is absolutely intoxicating. Getting a text or a phone call from somebody on the other side of the world that says thanks for your help. You like all the tournaments in the world don't amount to that. So that's pretty awesome. The other show that I'm part of is What Makes a Night. It's a series on Calbard's Corner. Shout out to Calbard KK Productions, Calbard's Corner. He's the one that hosts Outlands Royalty, Ask the Knights, several other shows in Meridies. So I got introduced to him I was at Kerpode Toasts, and we were all a bunch of people on there, and we're talking about content creators. I'm like, yeah, Cal, that's me. And so I talked to him about doing an interview on his show, and we quickly realized that I had something to say. And I had realized that, as Joel mentioned, there are tons of resources available right now for fighting. You can I don't know that there's been a better time to start from scratch in our sport. And there's plenty of resources for fighting. And I thought that, as somebody who is typically known for their prowess, I thought that it was important for me to do a series on the other parts of fighting. And so we do a series called What Makes a Night. And we've covered everything from franchise to wanting it to prowess to we had an episode on the 3 legs of the pyramid stool, the fighting arts and service. So it was intended to be an 8-part series to begin with. And we are, this coming weekend, we'll be doing the first of our bonus material. I have Duke Balfar from the East Kingdom is joining me for an episode on fealty. Because one of the first questions we got when we did this series was, well, what about a Master at Arms? And the short answer is same thing. But it came up enough that we're gonna have that conversation. And so that's been really great. I've got a lot of positive feedback on that as well. And people being able to understand kind of how that process works and some of the things that we need to think about on the path there. So
fantastic. I know that it's been so greatly appreciated. All of the content that you've put out has, like I said before, helped to keep people engaged, but also helped to inspire everyone and remind them that we'll get back together one day and you'll be able to either improve your game or reinvent yourself or just continue to see the people that you care about. So I know that's been huge for people.
And it's a big thank you to everyone who is involved in all of these shows. You know, it is a labor of love to a large degree. We're in the process of expanding our team a little bit, and so we completely understand how much time it does take for these shows. But I'm absolutely
along those
loving.
lines, I would like to make a shout out to Vesper de Atlantia from Kingdom of Atlantia. She's the one that does the production for Coach's Corner. She's been absolutely amazing, and I know Eva's been on a couple of her shows for the Known World Virtual Practice page. She's doing just a tremendous amount of work, and we really appreciate everything she does to make that a reality.
Yeah.
There's so many shows that are just creating great content that, and it's no matter what your flavor of SCA is, there's something that you can find now. And I think the one good thing that's coming out of this pandemic is that this library is forever. And well, maybe that's not a good thing for some people, for people like me that screw up all the time when I'm talking, but you know, it's great. And because, you know, 10 years from now, someone can get on YouTube and they can watch an interview with, you know, with Shauna going over, you know, what his views of the knightly virtues are. Or they can get on to a completely different track and watch Helga's Duchess Helga.
Yeah.
Sir Helga, whatever. You know, you can you know, and watch her show, you know, which is, you know, a little bit more irreverent, but is still, you know, great and has a lot of you know, a lot of value to it. Or they can watch your guys' phenomenal show. You know, this is something that, you know, hopefully the SCA will keep going with, even when we can start getting back to in-person meetings, is creating this. And because having started in a shire that was extremely remote from the rest of its kingdom, I can't even tell you how much I would have appreciated this kind of content being available to when I began the SCA. And I mean, you know, different time, internet and all that, but you know, we were like, the shire I started playing in was 6 hours away from its nearest group, and the nearest group was actually in a different kingdom. And so, you know, having the resources available to just learn how to throw a damn flat snap, which I still can't do. You know,
Well, you're a lefty, you don't need one.
Well, yeah, I have a shallow wrap that kind of works as one, whatever. But to have that kind of resource available, or to have you know, whatever the case is, I think that's really the great one. And so major shout out to everyone that's out there and putting themselves out there for other people. So sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Joel's right. There is content for everybody. Like you know, just as another example, there's Saga Saturdays, Mistress Ula, and I think Kunahild is part of that, and Bear. They do Saga Saturdays where they kind of read through some of the Norse sagas, and you know, there's that. There's Outlands Royalty. There's Coffee with Cal. There's Ask the Knights Live. There's so many things that are out there, and there's something for everybody. And it's amazing, and it's awesome, and yeah, as Joel said, it's for forever, you know, because the internet's forever. But having an archive, I mean, we've done more recorded history of our society in the last year than has been done in the 50 plus years before that, and it's accessible to everybody. And you know, and it is, again, it's a tremendous honor to be part of that in any way.
Yeah. I think there's a full schedule that gets posted on the Known World Society Facebook page every week. So
yeah, Helga's put together the Known World Entertainment Guide. So that's out there as well, where you can kind of go and see some of the regularly scheduled stuff that's out there, because and it's, you know, from when she first put that together, because, you know, when the pandemic first started, it was like, oh, I mean, all of these shows just popped up, like, and they were all organic.
A lot of people have a lot of spare time. Still
yeah,
do.
Everybody's got all the spare time, and I know with Rifkin, when she did the Murder of Dukes interview series, you know, part of what she was saying is like, so she had this this quest that she had set upon herself to fight 50 dukes in a 1 year period. And then when it became obvious that she wasn't going to do that for that, somebody suggested, well, why don't you interview them instead? And she's like, that's brilliant. And so, and she just started doing it, and it just took off. And like, I know I've watched every one of them, most of them live. There were probably other things I needed to be doing, but I was more interested in watching what she was doing. And all these shows just popped up organically, and they all filled the need. The show that Joel does with Dagmar, the Grace Under Pressure, was another one that just, you see a need and you're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we do this? And I'm going to do a little shout out to my wife who's in the other room, and remind her that CalBard is still ready to do the series that she wanted to do as well. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But there's always, everything that's come up is just, it was the right time. It was just natural. It was organic, and you know, it fits all sorts of different needs, and there's something for everybody. And when we get back to playing live again, some of this will stay and some of it won't. And again, it will be organic and it'll be natural, and people will do what they have the capacity to do.
Yeah, I know that we've the Crown Between Two Roses team has been talking about longevity and whether we're still current. And we've actually, hopefully coming up, got some more crowns to interview, which will be very exciting because there are crowns changing over. There's always landed royalty that we would be able to interview, and other members of the populace, just to share their stories, because I think that's what we try to do here. Yeah.
I think sharing the stories is, you know, it's so great because it's so easy to feel alone. And especially with what's going on, with the world being the way it is, it's so easy to feel like you're alone in your struggles, or that, you know, like, you know, with the story I told earlier, you know, like it would be so easy for me to feel like I'm the first stupid kid to hit on a queen with her husband 2 people down, you know, like, but like it's so easy to feel like you're alone. And
Oh, trust
you know,
me, you're not.
I know, but you know, and so I, you know, hopefully the stories that the people are able to tell on these interview series resonate with someone. And if I do a year or two's worth of these interviews with royal consorts, but one person can watch it and go, hey, that makes sense to me, you know, then it was everything was worth it. You know, because we're all just trying to make the world feel like a smaller place. And you know, that's my little soapbox on that one. Sorry.
And you know, our society is getting older, and some of these people that have been interviewed are not going to be around long.
No, that's right. And we look at the isolation. So Lockup has always felt quite distanced from the rest of the known world, and all of a sudden we're not. And I've been, you know, I am Kingdom Seneschal at the moment, and saying to my Seneschals and to my Kingdom officers that Lockup's actually on a pedestal right now, because we are the kingdom that is doing the events, and we are being seen across the known world. And all of the crown tournaments that we've had and events has just been phenomenal, and it has made our kingdom feel a lot closer to everyone else.
I can tell you, when I did my interview with Rifkin and she asked that question, if you could find anybody in the world, who would it be? My answer was the Kingdom of Lockhook. It's like, it's a whole new clientele for me. I want to get down there. I want to like take all your authorized fighters and just line them up and just let me go through. I want to fight.
Just let me come with like your tech baggage or something like that. I want to come with for that.
Yeah. We'll totally be in for that. Absolutely.
Just line them up.
So I know we've come up over the hour, but I'm desperate to ask another question if everyone's still happy to do a little more.
I'm game. Yeah.
I'm down to party.
Cool. It's more that I wanted to pull us back out of pandemic time and back into some fun times. So I wanted to ask, what is your most memorable court moment, either administered or witnessed?
Oh Lord.
Go ahead, Joel.
God.
Sean's got too many
Uh,
reigns to think of.
no, I
I think I've got mine though. So
That's burden.
Yeah, so I totally got called up to an award and just I got called up into court and totally just busted my own ass on the way up. Um, I was completely caught off guard because at the stage I was at, I didn't get called up into court for anything good very often. Usually it was more of the shut up in the back because I was talking too much. And I had just gotten this shiny new red belt at the time. And they called me up into court, and it was actually to get an award, but I wasn't expecting it. So I was kind of sitting in like the back of the court and like the middle of the aisle though, because that's where, you know, the hecklers all hang out at in every event ever. And I was like, oh shit. And I said that really loudly and audibly. Sorry, I don't know what the PG rating is for the show. I'm sorry.
There is none.
But yeah, so I said that very loudly and audibly, and I went to stand up and I stood on the end of my belt because I hadn't had a chance to trim it down yet. And so it was a normal like ring belt that was like 14 feet long, you know, and I went to stand up and I stood on the end of my own one, and I immediately just took a header, and like, we're talking like my face broke my fall kind of header. And then I stood up and I'm like, yep. And I went up there, and as I was walking up, like, I realized that I had actually busted my lip. So I was kind of like doing this number. And yeah, then I called up there and I got my my second AOA because because there was a miscommunication and they didn't realize I already had an AOA. And so, but yeah, so there, that was the first one that I can think of off the top of my head. So, Sean, I'm sure yours is a lot better than mine.
So I'm going to do a different one than I was originally thinking of, but I have a lot. Honestly, I have been doing this for a long time. So there's so much magic that happens in court that so many, yeah. So at the end of my third reign, my queen at the time was now Duchess Karen. She was the premier laurel of our kingdom. After my first reign, got separated. Still wanted to win crown. I asked her if I could fight for her in crown. I asked her husband first, and he said yes. And so I did the 2 reigns with her. Karen, again, the premier laurel of our kingdom. For me at the time, it was making her queen was one small thing that I could do to recognize an entire generation of people who had raised me, right? Literally raised me from a child. And you know, if I could just pluck one of them out of the crowd and put them in the highest position of honor that we have, that was something I could do. I was fortunate to do it twice. So at the end of that reign, her husband, who is a knight, had not been fighting for a number of years, Sir William Gallaglass, a very good friend of mine, also somebody who raised me. He was the absolute backbone of both of those reigns. He like made everything happen, like took the trailers out to Penzic and everything. He was absolutely indispensable. So when we stepped down, in our kingdom, typically whoever had been sovereign gets to name their consort as Countess or Duchess. And I named her Countess after my second reign. And so after this reign, I took the crown I took her ducal coronet from our crown. She was kneeling before me, and I said it would be my great honor to name you Duchess, but I just can't do it. And her husband had escorted her up to court, so he was standing right there, and I looked at him and I said, none of this would happen without you. And I said, the SCA is made up of moments. I can't possibly repay you for everything that you've done for us in 2 reigns to support this and to make this happen. And all I can do is give to you this one moment right now. And I gave him her coronet, and I let him name her Duchess.
That's lovely.
That's
Man,
awesome.
like
That was
my
amazing.
story is about stepping on my own belt tip and tripping on my face, and
Oh,
yours is like,
Joel, I have
Man,
stories about me stepping on my belt.
man, like I can't compete with that. Like, what the hell? So, I mean, like
I was a teenage knight in the SCA. Believe me, I have stories about stepping on all kinds of things.
like I mean, like, because like, you know, when I was offered is one of those moments that, you know, will like forever stick with me, especially because of how clueless I was when it was all leading up to it.
All the
'Cause,
signs were
I
there.
mean,
It was pretty
no,
obvious.
I missed them. Like I missed them. Like I totally missed. So
Of course you did.
is it okay to tell this? I don't want to
Sure.
okay.
So we call you Captain Oblivious now.
Captain Oblivious, right?
Oh no, I was so okay. So the event that I was offered at, I like all the signs were super obvious, but I am a very oblivious person and I totally missed every single one of them. Because I'm like, oh hey, my knight who hasn't played in 5 years wants to come out and come to this event. He's gonna drive up from Las Vegas. That's gonna be fun. I miss him. You know, great, because I was my knight went inactive for a long time. You know, we you know we stayed in that relationship because of you know, just what our friendship was like and where I was at. But anyways, so he came up to an event and he wanted to fight and, you know, wanted to do all this. And so, you know, that was the first clue. So at that time I was on a Artemisia has what's called the Chosen Seven, which are the king's like personal guard. And it's, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's based off of Byzantine.
No, it was a holdover from when we were a principality. At the time, we had like a princess's guard, but we didn't really have like a prince's personal bodyguard. And so the Chosen Seven was something that was kind of a holdover, and it's kind of changed from what it was as a principality. And I know for me, it's the people that I see that are most correctly on the path to knighthood, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're the hottest fighters in the kingdom.
But so I was on the Chosen Seven, and the king, Duke Timur, who was king at the time, one thing he had his seven do was go up and speak about something they saw that day that was chivalrous or inspiring or whatever the case was. Well, Timur and my knight Samuel had been talking about like a fostering relationship and things along those lines, but I didn't connect those dots either. So they go up into court and they asked me to speak that day on what I had seen, and I had kind of been preparing because they had told me before that I was going to do it. And you know, I can do these interviews because I don't see all the people, but when I stand up in front of people, I'm like, and I forget. But so I end up basically making a big dick joke. I'm not going to lie. I spoke in great detail about my friend Sir Marcello and his accuracy with his spear and how controlled his blows were and everything. And you know, I tried to make it this flowery words, and really what it was that he had stabbed me in the groin like 3 times with a spear during the melees those days. And so I was just making an inside joke on that one.
I think Joel told that story with some thrusting motion too.
Maybe I'm a subtle person. And so I'm like, okay, and there. So I talked about Marcello and how great his precision that day was and his accuracy and blow calibration. And I talked about, I talked him up, and I'm like, okay, that's it. And I went and I like bowed to the crown and I went to leave. And Samuel had snuck up and grabbed me by my tunic and like basically threw me back down on my knees in front of His Majesty, and was like, we've been talking and I've been trying to foster him over to you and he just won't break the fealty and there's nothing we can do about that. And His Majesty was like, well, there's only one way we can solve this. And during that entire time, like the chivalry apparently had been like sneaking up behind me. And so whenever they called up all the members of the Order of the Chivalry, like they were all basically already standing there. And all the way through all of this, I had no clue what was happening. I did not connect those dots at all. Because like, but yeah, and like whenever Mistress Fiametta, who actually is my Laurel now, was the court herald, she called up all the members of the Order of the Chivalry. I'm like, wait, why do they need to be? And then the tears started coming down. But yeah, so there's a little bit more of a serious kind of story. I don't have a lot of good serious stories. That would be the other really memorable court moment, was when I got ambushed by all my friends, but it wasn't really an ambush. I'm just really oblivious.
It's nice when it all comes together, though.
Oh, it came together beautifully. And then I was on vigil for like, 6 months or something like that, because they offered me like the second event of their reign, and then I was recognized at Estrella. So yeah, it was a long time.
I love a good bushwhacking.
Yeah, I thought I was going to screw it up the entire time, but like it didn't hit me until like 3 days afterwards. So sorry.
Oh, wow. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to speak with you both today. It really has. And the stories that you have told have definitely made me laugh, and I'm sure that they've made lots of other people laugh who have been watching. And we've had quite a few comments come in on the Facebook post.
I'm scared.
Those comments.
Fun stuff. Well, we appreciate everybody watching, and again, my great thanks to both of you and everybody at the Crown Between Roses for doing your part to keep us together as well. And we really appreciate what you're doing, and it has been a great pleasure being here with both of you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your experiences and wisdom with us today. We really do appreciate it. Without our guests, none of this would be possible. I think next weekend, B and I are teaming up again to interview Mistress Ashaxi and Sir Rifkin from the Sisters Interview and various other shows and programs that they have headed up. So that's going to be really exciting. We mentioned them a couple of times here today, so I'm excited to get to speak to them again. And
yes, Friday night, we actually have the Baron and Baroness of Ilthafen joining us. Yes, so please tune in on that Friday night to meet another Baron and Baroness from our great lands of Lockup.
Well,
thank you so much for having us. This was a lot of fun. I was terrified, but I'm really glad we did this. This was fun. So.
Hopefully you can have gained a little bit more confidence, as if you needed it.
Yeah, it's weird not having the script in front of me on what I'm getting. So, I'm having to actually think of the answers. It's scary. So.
Yeah. So thank you
so much. Go ahead, Bea.
And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. It's definitely a bringing together and a sharing of our knowledges and of our cultures across the known world. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, The Crown Between Two Roses, and we look forward to seeing you on our next interview. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.